Welcome to Living Free in Tennessee, where we talk about building the life you choose on your terms. Today is Monday, February 26th, 2024, and this is episode 870 of Living Free in Tennessee. And it is a Monday show, so we'll do our usual segments, of course. And today I'm going to talk about what you can do now to get your garden beds ready, because it's garden hoe season. I have a patch that says I'm a garden hoe, and it has a picture of a garden hoe, and that makes people laugh whenever they see it. Anyway, uh, even if you procrastinated in the fall, you can still get your gardens together. It will be a little different than had you been on the ball in the fall, but I was not on the ball in the fall. It's what made me think of this episode today. I'm also going to cover Tales from the Prepper Pantry, the weekly shopping report from Joe. I have a frugality tip in, and Operation Independence. Before we hop into that, though, I want to talk about our weekly mail. I send out a weekly email on Monday, and it has the live stream schedule for the week. It has a recipe that we share. It has a homestead tip, has news from the network, featured events from all y'all, and it thanks our sponsors. And I usually have a little message at the top. And today I just asked, hey guys, do you like this longer format? Because what we used to do was send an email out every time. Like, I would do the show, I'd record the show, I'd post the show, I'd send the email. And I just know that I get a lot of emails. And so we did a survey last year, like, what do you want us to do with the email? And people said, most people preferred like one longer email. We also talk about the episodes we did last week, all of that. So today I put in there, reply to this email if this is working for you, or do you prefer going back to notices for, daily emails, getting every show notice sent out. And so far the feedback I've gotten is people prefer the longer format. But if you don't always look at the weekly mail, like, check it out. If you haven't signed up for the weekly mail, you can find out all things LFTN at livingfreeintennessee.com. Just go there to sign up. That being said, our live stream schedule this week: tomorrow at 12:30 p.m., I'll be live with Wazoo Gear Company and John Willis. And that should be a fun discussion about entrepreneurship and some other great things. We've got another project accelerator. If you remember Project Monetizing Willow, Monetizing Sunshine, we're going to do that with Ken Esch. So that'll be live Wednesday at 2 p.m. I'll be joined by Toolman Tim Cook, and I will also be joined from Sean with Hack My Solar. Thursday at 7, the Self-Reliance Festival live, 7 p.m. It's going to be the Three Sisters this time. So we'll have Kentucky Sustainable Living, we'll have the Midwest Preparedness Project, and of course, I'll be there. And then Friday at 9:30, we have Homestead Happenings with the Tactical Redneck. Before we jump into Tales from the Prepper Pantry, I do want to remind you, early bird pricing expires on Friday for the Self-Reliance Festival. That means up until midnight on Friday, you can still get your tickets for the Self-Reliance Festival for $20 less than they will be after prices go up. So go to selfreliancefestival.com if you want to grab your tickets. The agenda has turned out, as usual, to be stellar. And we've even got somebody talking about how to take care of your digital privacy, which is funny because we use a Google form to collect speaker information. And he's like, nope, I'm not using that. And I was like, just send me your stuff. Anyway, and that's good. It's important to know how to de-Googleify yourself and how to protect your privacy online. It makes you more cancel proof. And if you're going to share information with other corporations, wouldn't you like to know you're doing it? That session will be at Self-Reliance Festival. I also want to thank our two sponsors of today's show. And the first one is Hollow Roast Coffee. Hollow Roast Coffee is my company, and we roast everything to order. I was, in fact, roasting in 2 sets yesterday because we had sheep drama. And I was supposed to go to the pool. So I roasted everything up until the last 2 roasts. And I was like, I'll do those Monday morning because the mail doesn't come till 1 o'clock anyway on Monday. We'll be fine. And then more sheep hijinks happened. So I went over and helped the sheep. And by that point, it was too late for me to get to the pool and get back and do the creators roundtable that we did last night at 7 with Toolman Tim, Backwoods Butcher, and Brian from the Lots Project. And so I was like, well, I guess I'm doing Pilates today. So I did Pilates and then, took a shower, did some more roasting, got everything else. But that's that's the thing that makes the coffee great, guys, is being able to know that you're getting coffee that is roasted to order. It's the freshest we can get you in the mail. And if you want to check out the coffee, go to hollowroast.com. If you are a member, there is a discount. Also, want to remind you that Agros Tax Advice has been a supporter of the show since we launched our sponsorship opportunities. He was one of the first people to reach out to me. And Matthew seriously works with you to analyze how your funds come in, figure out the best way to structure yourself so that you keep more of your money in your pockets by using the tax code to your advantage. He's got a webinar tonight at 7 p.m., I believe it is. Go to agrostaxadvice.com/webinar to sign up. It's free. And if you don't get to catch it live, you can still sign up and see the recording. With that, it's time for the first segment of today's show, Tales from the Prepper Pantry. This is where we talk about storing what you use and using what you store. And, at this time of year, it's really tempting for me to go to the grocery store and spend a ton of money on random stuff at the grocery store because they have fresh vegetables not in season. And that's because they're shipped from all over the world. And when I moved to a homestead, I made a decision to not eat things that are not in season most of the time. If I'm having like a hot pepper craving that's fresh or whatever, I will go buy them at the grocery store just if I want that, right? But I think it's healthier to eat the things that are coming off the land that you live on as they're coming off the land. I think there's a reason that hot peppers are ripe when it's hot outside. And I think there's a physiological response that helps your body cope with the heat, for example. So that's just my personal philosophy. And as a result of living on the homestead for such a long time, I don't need the grocery store as much. And so when the grocery stores are out of things, it's less frantic to me. And this really went into hyper overdrive for me in 2020 because we didn't go to the grocery store or for 6 or 8 weeks. And I was like, well, let's test our preps. Let's see how we're doing. And I just so happened to be growing lettuce inside that year. And so we had like all the lettuce we needed for everybody in the holler, which was great. And I was just doing it for fun and because I like fresh lettuce better than lettuce that's been shipped from California. And like it's just not as flavorful as what you can grow in your house. So we did that. And this year, with all of the things going on with the construction, and if you come to my house right now, the living room is just a pile of boxes. It's just a pile of boxes, and that's because the room I'm sitting in now, which is my studio, I decided to paint it, redo how the bed works. So there's a Murphy bed in here now, and reorganize the whole thing because I had the opportunity to do it with half the stuff out of my house anyway. And this room was designed to run a newspaper, not a YouTube like online presence, not a podcast, not what I'm doing now, not the homestead. I mean, it ran the homestead, but it ran a newspaper originally. And so it was set up for that. And I'm like, okay, it's time to think about what we actually spend our time doing. We run a coffee business. I have a podcast. I do speaking engagements and I'm live all the time. So we painted this wall black. It was a lot of work, actually. I thought I'd have it done in a weekend. And it turns out with the way my weekends usually go, because there's always a homestead project to do too. And it's really important to keep up on those to some extent so that you actually end up with the life you say you're living, right? Like the vegetables actually grow. Otherwise, what are you doing this for? Well, I didn't get my lettuce put back together. Like I just now have my seedling growing shelf over here again because it was in storage. And I was really missing lettuce and I knew I could put some lights up and just grow it in mason jars, but I figured it would be better to put my energy into getting this back together. So the other day, as I was unpacking kitchen things, because everything I unpack, it's like you either put it away or you give it away, right? That's where we're at right now. I've given a lot of stuff to the Goodwill. I saw my bag of sprouts seeds. So seeds that you can sprout, and you like the sprouts that you get on sandwiches and on the top of salads. I saw those and I was like, huh, I can at least make sprouts and then I'll have like fresh sprouts to eat. And so I looked around and what I have to do sprouts is like a mason jar and it's a lid with a little mesh screen. They're not expensive to buy. They're not hard to make. Makes the whole sprout making process easier. Couldn't find them. Haven't unpacked them yet. Don't know where they are. And I was like, well, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, Nicole. Just get started. So I took a tablespoon of the sprout seeds, put it in my mason jar, filled it with water, and then I thought, okay, when things go wrong for me with sprouts, it's because I forget that they exist. And so one place I know I'm always going to go in the morning is the shelf with the coffee mugs. So I put it in the shelf with the coffee mugs, even though that means I can't put away all my coffee mugs. That's fine. And I was like, at a minimum, I know I'm going to see this in the morning. Now, whether or not I do the thing I need to do, I've given myself the best possible setup to be able to do it. And the thing is, I like to grow my sprouts in the dark. I like to sprout them in the dark. If you want them greened off, you grow them in the dark and then put them out on your sunny windowsill for a day, and they green up a little bit. I don't ever green them up. I just throw them all non-green in the fridge. I can't say never. I rarely green them up. So I did that, and I got up the next morning and I did what you need to do. You strain them out, and I just used a strainer since I didn't have that special lid. And then I put them back in the jar, and I'm like, I still don't have the screens. Like, I still haven't found the screens. So I got a paper towel and a ring for a jar, and I just sort of with my hands tamped them on the side of the jar, put that on, and I stored the jar sideways in the coffee cabinet. And all week long, when I got my coffee, while the cup was making itself, my cup of coffee takes 45 seconds to make itself in the morning. And it takes maybe another 45 for the coffee machine to warm up to begin with. So we're talking about, it's a minute and a half for a cup of coffee for me, which is not very much time. And so I get that started, and I, have the sprouts, and while my coffee's making, I rinse them, strain them, and put them back out. And I'm straining them with a strainer because I don't have the lid. And I think the fourth day I did that, which was the last day I needed to do that, T was like, hey, do you want one of those strainer lids? And I'm like, yes. Do you know where they are? Like, I haven't seen them anywhere. And he's like, oh no, I bought a pack of them because I've been making like some really cool infused teas, and I needed the strainer lid for a jar that I'm making the tea in. And it came in a pack of 3, and I only need one. Do you want one of mine? I'm like, yes, I do. So my final day, I finally had the proper lid. So what I do in that situation is rinse them and then pour through the strainer that's on the jar. And then I put it diagonal in a bowl so that any additional like lurking water can kind of drip out the bottom. That's why I was putting it on the side too. And they're less likely to mold, or I have fewer mold problems when I do it on the side or diagonal like that versus up. And I think it's also because they have more surface area and air. Anyway, woke up next morning, they were ready to go. And this week we have sprouts all week. And tonight I'm starting my next round. So the key there is figure out how many sprouts do you use, and then on what cycle are you starting them? Do you have 1 jar or 2 jars going? I have found with the way things have been going here lately that a jar, wait a day, and a jar, that's what I used to do, will work best, and then I can put it on salads. Now, the salad I'm eating is not salad I've grown, but I'm going to have my own sprouts. And so that's one incremental step towards actually eating what we're producing here. Usually we make the salad, but this year we're just not. And that's, oh yeah, Angie says she rinses hers and puts it upside down in the dish drainer. Yeah, that's another way. The problem is I can go days without looking at that dish drainer, Angie. That's why I had to put it where the coffee cups go. I'm really good at dish drainer avoidance. It's a personal talent of mine. Although right now I can't because I've just done so many homestead cooking projects that like my second sink is full, my dish drainer is full, and it's kind of things are balanced there. So my next step is put all those dishes away once they've air dried. That's just the way that goes in my kitchen sometimes. We made butter today, and I did the last step on the basturma, which is a cured meat. And that required me using my blender twice, my food processor once, a big old bowl, and some other things. So it was a lot of washing of the things today. But I had little spaces, like those are all 15-minute projects, guys. So I had little spaces in between things. Like I was thinking of pre-recording this show and just playing it at 2 p.m. Because I got some feedback that the live show, when I'm talking to people in the comments, when you're just an audio listener in your car, that's less of a good experience than if you're on the live stream. And so they kind of like the previously recorded shows. So I was like, well, hey, I'll treat Monday more like a previously recorded show. I still take questions, but I'm going to try to take them at the end, this, rather than interrupt a sentence halfway through. So I'm going to be more cognizant of not interrupt, like finishing the thought. And then if I respond to the person in the comments, I respond to the person in the comments. So I hear your feedback when you give it to me, guys. So thanks for that. Anyway, I have been refining what we store here for 5 or 6 months now. And as a result of that refining, I've actually been using up some of the stuff in my pantry that I would usually have as a cushion because I use less of everything since we've gone keto, except for meat. We eat a lot of meat. But I just use less of a lot of, like, from cleaning supplies to spices to all sorts of stuff. We're just using less, or I've produced so much on the homestead that I don't buy it anymore. So, things that I buy cumin because I don't grow cumin at this time. I could grow cumin. I've tried to grow cumin. I haven't done well with it because I haven't paid attention to it. But that's been an interesting thing because I used to use a lot of different sauces. And I just use, like, I make a sauce rather than use a commercial sauce for a lot of things. And that makes a big difference in how much area you need to store stuff. You need, like, the basic ingredients rather than the actual thing. Today, I needed allspice, and I don't have allspice. So I looked up allspice substitutes, and it's a 1 to 1 to 1 ratio. So 3 different things: cinnamon, nutmeg, and a third thing. Oh, cloves. That's allspice. Now, when I was reading about it, they said allspice is actually a fruit that's dried and ground, but allspice that if you need to make a substitute, do that. Or a lot of allspice you buy at the store is those 3 things. So I don't know. That's what I used today on the Bosturma instead of allspice because I didn't have any, or it's in a box somewhere still. This is totally possible. We are doing a spice reset because you don't want to have spices around for 100 years because they lose their potency. But if you like nutmeg, I like to have a little bit of nutmeg sprinkled on my coffee. So good. It, like, makes me think I'm having a sweet, but no sugar added, right? You can grate fresh nutmeg from a nut over the coffee. And I got this because I was at Jack Spirko's event and my friend David Siegler was there and he was doing his coffee and he, like, pulls out of his pocket this nutmeg grater and grates nutmeg on his coffee. I'm like, hey, I want some of that. So he put some on mine. I'm like, I can't believe you walk around with a nutmeg grater in your pocket. And he's like, well, I don't all the time, but he has one that it's like a cone shape. I think it was an antique where it has a nut storage area for the nutmeg. And then the grater is built in, which I've always wanted one of those and never found one of those at an antique store. But totally, if you find one, let me know, man, because I'm in the market for one of those because that would be great for, like, travel. But I just have, like, a square little fine grater with a handle, and I use that. It works great. But the fresh ground nutmeg is so much more flavorful than the stuff you get in, like, a little container at the store. And you can buy bags of nutmegs or nutmeg nuts, I don't know, at, Indian spice stores and stuff, and they're not that expensive. So it's a total game changer as far as, like, flavor profile. And again, that means those actually store pretty well long, kind of like green coffee beans do. So, that's a way to store it longer term, a way to keep your budget in check, and it's a way better flavor experience is that fresh ground nutmeg. So my garden planning is not as methodical as some people's, and I'm starting my garden planning process now. That's like that for me, that means what goes where, not so much what I'm going to grow because I sort of know what I'm going to grow. And then I add a few extra new plants. Like this year, I got all excited because I listened to Jack's podcast, the survival podcast, about things he's trying from Baker Creek. And there was a spinach replacement green that does well in both cold weather and hot weather. So I'm going to try that. And then some of his a cucumber replacement and another, like, gourd. Those are the 3 things I've added. Other than that, I'm doing a lot of, like, just grow a lot of different things. I grow herbs and spices. I grow berries that are already in the ground. I will try brassicas again. We'll see how they go this year. I actually still have Brussels sprouts from last year regrowing themselves, so we'll see what those do. I'm just like, how long will you go? Go for it, man. I mean, I want to see. I don't need optimal production off these plants. Like I have never grown as many Brussels sprouts as I'd like to eat, but maybe I'm learning something here, and maybe that changes next year. But that's not it. This year though, I always choose something to focus on. And this year I'm focusing on getting better at beet cultivation because I've had a mixed experiences with beets. Now tomatoes I usually do pretty well with. If it gets too hot, it gets too hot, and there's nothing I can do about blossom set if it's too hot. But in general, tomatoes I do well with. Peppers I do okay with. Tactical does pretty well with peppers. And then other things I do well with, right? And the thing I don't do great with are the brassica family and the beets. So we're going to try again. Let's try again. And I've put a lot of attention in my soil this year, although not quite enough, as we will hear when we get into the main topic of today's show. So that means I'm not really buying seeds. I already have seeds. I did buy a few seeds this year. I spent $40 on seeds because I'm trying a new tomato variety too. But I saved the seeds, and that goes back to making the resilient garden. Like when I find something I like that has the kinds of seeds you can save, and by which I mean you can save seeds from anything, but some stuff when you save the seeds, if you don't protect them from cross-pollination from other varieties, you may not get the thing that you grew originally. So there are some seeds it's easier for me just to buy the seeds, and other times I do save the seeds. Or I just let things go to seed, right? It's a great thing. Volunteer plants in my garden, I just let them go even though they're not supposed to be there. But I really want to increase production on a couple of things. One being beets, and the other one being even more tomatoes than last year. So we'll see how that goes. I don't want to go into critical mass on tomatoes. What I'm doing is a similar number of plants and paying attention to how I prune them and their nutrient load. So that's happening, and that's all about putting things back in my pantry, by the way. The seedling starts are actually happening. As we know, I am now 3 weeks late on starting my seedlings. It'll still be okay. It will still be okay. I may, if I decide to do like Brussels sprouts, buy the plants, but we'll see. I have another friend who starts seedlings, so a lot of times I can trade her for things I didn't start in time. But the thing that was in my way is no longer in my way, and the seeds are out, and it's just happening sort of one step at a time at this point. And then I am investigating the possibility of sealing the top of the prepper pantry, as I talked about last week. We're not sure we can hang melamine there because we're not sure how that ceiling is hung to begin with, by which I mean there may not be studs to screw into. Now, you just shook your head and went, what? Right. That's the way my house is. Sometimes there aren't things to screw into unless you drill through metal, for example. So depending on the construction of the ceiling already there, that will determine what we can do as far as just shoring up that a little bit better so it stops dropping bits of plaster onto everything. Because I am going to eventually rip that out. But I really, really, really don't want to rip anything out right now. I'm ready for a construction break. A vacation from construction, if you will. And then, of course, the bosderma. So a while ago, I took a very lean on like a small olive round that I had from a smaller cow and cut the whole thing into strips that were about 3 inches thick, like square, but long. And I basically did, if you've ever heard of a salt box, basically I just covered them in salt. And I used kosher salt. And then put it in the fridge for 3 days. And what happened was that salt just poured a lot of the moisture out of the meat. It's a curing process. And the salt itself ended up more like a liquid salt brine. I poured that off, and then I soaked the meat in water for whatever the recipe told me, but I think it was like 2 to 4 hours, and I did the minimum. So I soaked it for 2 hours in cold water, which through osmosis, pulled some of that salt back out to make the meat less salty. And then I dried it really well and encased it in paper towels. And if I ever do this again, I'm not using paper towels, but go with me for now. And then put it between two cookie sheets with weights on it and put it back in the fridge for a certain number of days that I can't remember. But if you look up Bosderma, you totally will learn. And that pressed out more liquid. And then I took the meat and I took the paper towels off, and that was really annoying because little bits of paper towel stuck to the dang meat, and I had to get it off of there. And then I hung them in my wine fridge at 50 degrees to cure for a couple of weeks. And then I made a spice mix paste that has sweet paprika, smoked paprika, pepper, allspice, garlic, and fenugreek, which is a grain like thing that you have to grind up, and it grinds up really well in the Vitamix, and it does not grind very well in the food processor, for those of you who care. So if you have a coffee grinder, that will work okay if you don't have a really good blender, but or buy it ground. And I made this paste and encased all of them in, like, it's an 1/8 to a 1/4 inch thick pancakey spicy paste, and they're hanging back in that wine fridge, which I turned down to 42 degrees towards the end of the process to slow it down because I knew I didn't have time to mess with it until today. So they're going to hang for like 3 more days, and I'll test to make sure that outer coating is dry and it'll be like good and stuck to it. And then you slice it thinly, and it's like a really great sort of pastrami, but dry, like dry salami meets pastrami meets Hungarian style spices profile. So we'll have that done, and I can't wait to try it. And if it's really, really good, I may put one in the freezer and bring it out at the spring workshop for one of our charcuterie nights. In fact, pretty sure that's what's happening. That's why I started it this early, because like I make homemade sauerkraut and all this stuff for the spring workshop. And oh gosh, I better make that. So, but you know, part of the cycle of creating your own meat is curing your own meat along the way. Like we make our own bacon, and I don't do things like the Bosderma, which takes a lot of interaction all the time, but different seasons throughout the year I will. Just like I made butter today because the farm where I get my cream gave me a 1/2 gallon of heavy cream last Tuesday. And they said, "I hope I'm not inundating you." And I'm like, "Oh no, because I'll make cheese or whatever." And I just drank their cream in my coffee. It was delicious all week. And yesterday I was like, okay, I have about half of it left, and I don't get more milk until Tuesday. So I still have some of my 1/2 gallon of milk that has cream in it. So I'll use that cream, and then I'll do the rest and make butter. And I hadn't used my Vitamix yet to make butter, so I brought it up to 58 to 60 degrees. So it works better if you bring the cream up. I've done that wrong, and 100% does not work as well with cold straight out of the fridge. And then I threw it in the blender on like midway on the Vitamix, so about 5.5 or whatever, and then turned it down as it started getting thicker as things separated. Because what happens is first you get whipped cream, and then you go further and it separates the fats from liquids, and you end up with the fats and the buttermilk. And then I poured it through a strainer to get the solids out, and then I worked with a spatula and the strainer, because I have a round strainer that's like a mesh style strainer, not like the one with the big holes for pasta noodles. And I had a bowl and I had some ice, and I just put it in the ice water, because butter is pure fat. And when you put it in water, like the water, it's not like the water is going to sink in. Pressed out the rest of the buttermilk in that bowl, and then shaped it and put it in the fridge. I did not add salt because I like unsalted butter, but unsalted butter goes bad faster. So we'll have unsalted butter this week, and then we've only got a week to use it up. So I'm going to use that up. But that was just like a huge gift that was given to me. And on that scale where I used, it was 1 pint of heavy cream, the Vitamix was perfect for making it. Now, Had it been more than a pint in there, I would have had a big mess because when the whipped cream whips, it gets big. So just know that for my Vitamix, 1 pint maximum. Just saying. 1 pint maximum. Next up, we have the weekly shopping report from Joe. The Dollar Tree was first, and some of the drink coolers are empty. I think that might just be them trying to get their poop in a group. He didn't say that. He said it. He said it even more nerdly, and I had to read it 3 times, so I thought I'd say poop in a group, so you knew what I meant. Because there are plenty of drinks on the shelves. The food coolers are well stocked. Other aisles look to be in good shape. Don't overlook Dollar Tree for cleaning supplies. He snuck in a frugality tip. That area has always been well stocked. They have a lot of awesome branded products. It's like awesome with an uppercase A, which we really like. And Awesome does make some awesome products, by the way, guys. Lysol, Ajax, and other name brands are also present in the section. $1.25 plus tax beats the tar out of typical grocery store prices. Although we did not go into Home Depot, the online price of a 2x4x8 was $3.38, a 13-cent increase. Aldi had slightly larger crowds the past few weeks. Other than the hiatus with the masa, they did not have difficulty maintaining stock. We found everything we wanted. Staple prices were eggs, $2.78. That's up $1, guys. Whole milk, $2.93. Heavy cream, $4.69. Butter, $3.69. Bacon, $4.29. Potatoes, $3.99. Sugar, $3.09. Flour, $2.29. 80% lean ground beef is $3.99. The egg price was a full $1 higher. If not handwritten, I would have thought it was a typo. We didn't buy eggs this week, so I can't confirm on our receipt. Although I have heard that egg prices might be going higher again. Just in time for my spring eggs to be ready to be for sale. I see the opportunity in the SADs on the inflation stuff, guys. Yeah, so a little price swing there on eggs. And $1 is a pretty big jump for a dozen eggs. So, let me know. Tell me if eggs have gone up in your area. I'm now curious about that. Anyway, untainted / ethanol-free gasoline was $3.69.9, which is slightly higher, but could also be a difference in the different station that he looked at. Next up, we have a frugality tip from Margot with an O. I did not put a T on your name, Margot, for once. Anyway, cool weather means outside projects. For me, one was a painting project. Guys, you got to realize Margot lives in Florida. So this time of year is ideal project time. And in the middle of summer, less so for outside projects. Anyway, I did some house touch up and I painted the driveway. My frugality tip is never buy the cheapest paint roller. Ah, that's right. A frugality tip can be spend more money on something that does better. Save yourself paint and energy expended by buying a good roller. Ask me how I know. For those of you who don't know, we have an internal joke in our network. Ask me how I know, where you say, this is my piece of advice. Ask me how I know. And then you ask the person how they know, and they tell you a funny story about how they had a really difficult time because they did not take their own advice to begin with. I can add to this tip that the one coat only paints, like the ones that are designed for one coat, which are more expensive than the cheapest one you can get at the store, they don't always work in one coat. Like I have one coat only paint in my office and it took 2 coats, but it did not take 3 coats and it did not take a coat of primer and a coat of it. So the better paints cover better and take less time because in many cases you do get away with just one coat. And even if you look at this black wall behind me, that took 2 coats, but it was going over white. Okay. It did not take 3 coats. It would have taken 3 coats. Ask me how I know, because I have an equally dark accent wall in my bedroom with red paint. And the accent wall took 3 coats. And it actually could have used a 4th-ish. I probably am going to repaint it same color over it this year because that was 5 years ago. And it's time. But not till this room's done. But a slightly more expensive paint saves you oodles of time, and your time is worth money, right? It's time you could be earning money, or it's time you could be investing in making your life better, or investing in some great relationships with people. So that's just going to add on to Margot with an O's tip, because I had to learn that the hard way by painting many, many rentals over many, many years until the one year I was like, I'm going to try the really expensive paint. And I was like, dang it. I could have been painting this whole apartment with one coat for the last 5 tenants, and instead it took me twice as long. And then, like, in the rental, that's another day you can't rent it, right? So, anyway, next up we have Operation Independence. This is where we talk about building local ongoing revenue in our lives. And I talk about finances on the homestead when it's germane. We haven't had a lot to say about money here. And that's because we've, like what we've had to say is we're buying more fencing stuff because the stupid sheep keep getting out. By the way, yesterday, all day, pretty much on and off, I was chasing sheep and dogs, and it was a cluster. And it was not that the fence wasn't working, but it was that one of the sheep, yeah, it's spring is in the air. We'll just put it that way. So we're ready to make eggs for sale signs and put it at the end of the road and try the honor system on dozens of eggs because we're finally, after a year ago, deciding we wanted to use chickens to compost stuff and increase egg production and sell eggs here and then locally at the marina over the hill. We finally have eggs. And it took that long, not because you can't ramp up faster, but it started with, hey, let's build a better chicken coop. And if you've seen the live, like I did a live stream one day for like 8 hours with Steve and Nighthawk just building the Holler Roost. It's called the Holler Roost. Get it? Ha ha ha. And named by David. And they built it, and then I ordered the chicks, and the chicks didn't come, and the chicks didn't come, and I reminded the person I had ordered the chicks, and he was like, "Oops!" And then he mailed me chicks that same day, and then I had to raise the chicks, and they had just started laying eggs when we got to the like deep cold of January, and my chickens did not lay through that. So we are back to the light is right, the eggs are coming on, the nutrition is right, and I am now producing more eggs than we can eat. Because what always happens is you like start getting eggs and it's just enough, and then you get more eggs, and then you get more eggs, and then you're like, I got so many eggs. So we're on that trajectory right now. I also did sheep math because we're processing a we're actually processing 2 animals. I think. I don't know if I'm processing 3 animals. I have to talk to T about that. But we are processing 2 animals this year, and it's just about time. So I sold, and like literally, I'm like, oh, it's time to process, dude. I get a text from Chef Brett, and he's like, hey, do you have any sheep coming up? And I'm like, in fact, I do. So I told him how much it was, and then I did the sheep math because we're gonna get $300 for the animal, and that, like, if we wanted to make money to pay a salary for raising sheep, let's just say that salary, a reasonable salary, was $50,000. I'm pretty sure we would have to sell 300 sheep by the time I take expenses out. 250 to 300 sheep. We're never going to do that. So now I'm evaluating my life choices on the sheep. But they do keep the grass mowed, and they do give us meat. So it's kind of an interesting thing to start thinking about. If you want to know why people don't do small farms like a flock of 20 sheep, that's why. That's why. And then you take that on the tail end of a day we spent chasing sheep. It was a lot of time. Just something to think about. Anyway, we're ready for the main topic of today's show, and that's late winter garden bed preparation. And I thought of this because I thought, well, it's spring is in the air. And that means that we have everything is time to do it at once. It's time to start the seedlings. It's time to plant the plants. It's time to trim the trees. It's time to, like, we're just getting ready for all the growth that will happen here. And then next thing you know, it'll be time to can all the things. We're going to start by making pickles usually, or pickled beets are usually the first thing I can every year. And then it goes into that cycle through the summer of like the pressure canning of the green beans and all of making the salsa and like all the good stuff. So I, of course, have to start this part of the talk with a discussion on intentions. I think intentions are great. Intentions help us move towards some of our best goals, some of our best long-term goals, the goals we put in place to build the life we want to live rather than continuing to live a life that was programmed for us by someone else. If you just go along to get along in the current system we live in, your life ends up often programmed by somebody else instead of what you really want, which then makes people unhappy and they go, crap, I need to do something different. And some of them find my podcast and then we help them do something different. That's what we do here, right? We talk about it a bunch. That's the tagline of the podcast, helping you live the life you choose on your terms because we're living free in Tennessee. um, the systems in our society are built to propagate themselves and they need people performing certain roles. And so we get programmed by the schools we go to, by the things we see, by our interactions with other people to live a life in service of the system rather than in service to ourselves and our families and our community. Now, that doesn't mean we're all jerks and not helping people, but it does, like if you think about getting out of college with $400,000 in debt or $200,000 in debt, and you're starting out life with the equivalent of a mortgage payment, and then you get your first job and it's like $40,000, that puts you in a less flexible situation than you could otherwise be in. And it can be really hard to get people who have been programmed by the system to see the system as anything other than the only option they have, right? So they're programmed by the system not to see any other opportunities or options. And so then they can't break out because they don't know that there is an out. They just think this is the way the world is, so I'll do this thing. And then when the system fails people, they get scared and they start looking for options. And when they start looking for options, our community can be the mentors and connectors for the people looking for options. We can connect them with their first step. And then a small percentage of the people who come here, right, looking for a better life, will actually take the next thing, the action it takes to change and to build the life that they choose on their terms. And I think a lot of you have heard my story from when I lived in Portland and I was very socialist, sort of with communist leanings. And overnight, I changed from that to libertarian. And a lot of seeds had been planted throughout my life, but the reason it happened is that Portland has a light rail system, and I was commuting to work on a bus. And the bus picked me up outside my door and 25 minutes later got me to downtown Portland where my job was. And they put in light rail, which because it was supposed to be a better system. And in order to take light rail, I had to take a bus to the rail. I had to then get on the train and go downtown, and that took me about an extra 45 minutes on top of the 25 minutes. And then, so the obvious thing to do was drive to the train station and take the train in. And then that only made the total commute about 45 minutes, which was still about twice what it used to take when I could just take a bus from outside my door that went straight down to Portland. And I went on a tear. I was like, if I had designed the system, blah, 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 would be different. And this would be different. And that would be different. And I just need to be in charge. And I was like, wait, if I have to be in charge, that's not really fair. And if it's not fair, then this whole system isn't fair. And I went from there to socialism isn't fair. And then I happened to be working on the same floor as a free market think tank with one of the top minds in the country on smart growth and environmental policies and mass transit. And I just happened to have talked to somebody in the hallway who worked there, and we were friends. I didn't really understand what he did for work. And I'm like, wait, Like when you said public policy and gave me a couple examples, you talked about buses. And I ended up sitting down with this guy for 45 minutes who was like one of the top minds. And I was like, oh, I get it. I get how markets could solve this problem better than the way we're trying to solve it now. Because the problem they're trying to solve with light rail was traffic paired with pollution from gas vehicles. But what they really did was it turned into a whole social engineering thing in Portland. And they took the most expensive, slowest way to move people and put that in rather than other options. So that was the day that I realized that socialism wasn't fair and completely changed. But for those who hear the story, what they see in their mind is that that change just happened and I became the Nicole Sauce you know today. And that's not how that happened at all. I worked in public policy for 14 years after that. And I still had habits and programming that I needed to let go of that I had grown throughout my life by watching TV and by going to government schools and by all of those things. Heck, despite being a thought leader in a world of agorism now, I still find programming in me that I have to deprogram. I have to say, like, why am I making this assumption that this is the only way to do this? What makes me think it is what it is? Like every time I say it is what it is, I'm like, is it really? Sometimes it is, by the way. But I hear myself say that and I have to decide, is this a reality I'm accepting or is this really the parameters around me? So the intention to move myself towards true freedom several decades ago and opt out of the system, as much as I've moved from being an urban chick completely unprepared to take care of myself through anything to a prepared badass homesteader, that took a couple decades. And it took incremental change and it took the intention to change and the intention to be more aware. And I'm still not aware all the time, right? And now I share failures in my journey and I share failures in the homestead because I am a badass homesteader, guys. I'm really good at it. But I share these things because the Instagram homesteading culture is all about the good side of homesteading. And homesteading is heartbreaking and it's hard and it's messy and it's disgusting. And it's one of the most rewarding parts of my life because I've built this life the way I want it on my terms. And it does help me opt out of some dependency. But better than that, I find it very rewarding to do all that hard work and the relationships I have with the land and the food and the animals around me. But what does that have to do with garden prep, you ask? It's about intention. I had intentions in the fall to get my garden beds put away like you're supposed to, where you clear everything out and you either do a cover crop or you do the deep mulch system or cover it with tarps or whatever you're going to do. And what really happened in the fall with those intentions is I got one garden bed ready and the other 5 garden beds, because I have 5 that I primarily cultivate, ended up, well, let's just say not ready. Right? So I ended up instead speaking at a lot of things in the fall. And some of the things I just didn't want to say no to them because they were people who had done a lot of stuff at my events for me. And also, I had a major repair to handle at my home, which completely disrupted everything. And all of my spare time was pretty much on that project when it could be, rather than getting stupid garden beds ready. And now it's time for spring planting in Tennessee. I know it's not spring yet. Spring's not for another 3 weeks officially, but peas are already in the ground here. Potatoes go in on Friday officially. March 1st is when I put potatoes in. They might get burnt by a frost after that, but I've never had a year where I didn't get potatoes when I put them in on March 1st, and I don't even eat that many potatoes, but I plant them every year for fun, mostly. So, spring is in the air, and I ain't ready. So, I'm gonna talk about how you get your garden ready. I'm gonna kinda go through 2 things. 1, what do you do what do you do if you've never had a garden there before? And 2, what do you do with a garden like me, like you already have, and how can how can you make that into something you can actually plant into? And I finished my thought, and now I'm going to respond to a comment. I almost did it, guys. So somebody says, join the club. Also guilty of not prepping my beds. Yeah, a lot of us are. A lot of us get busy. I mean, you get to the end of the year, and the thing about doing a homestead perfectly is some people actually manage that. I'm not one of those people. I have other priorities sometimes, and this was one of those times. So if you've never had a garden before, there's some things to think about. One, do you want to do in-ground beds? Which if you have soil and a good place for it, it's the easiest option. Or do you want to do raised beds? Raised beds are great because you can just build the thing, import your soil, costs a lot of money, but import your soil and start growing, and you'll probably do okay. The negative sides to raised beds, if you do it that way, is that buying that much soil is expensive. And it's also, if you are in a very dry climate, raised beds dry out faster. So you really got to think about water on those. Like, how am I going to keep them watered? How am I going to automate that? Because the easiest way to fail on a raised bed, especially if you're new to gardening, is you put it in and then you don't water it. And then when plants don't get water, they die. Another thing I like about raised beds is that you can make them taller. So if you have back issues, that can make it easier to cultivate. So you really want to look at your situation. But if you're going to go the easy, cheap way and you actually have soil, not everybody has soil. Like some people have to do raised beds because they have the equivalent of a concrete backyard. That's Jack Spirko's place, basically. Um, then your next thing is, am I going to till this or am I going to go with the no-till method? What do you mean by that, Nicole? I thought everybody had to till their gardens. No. So the rototiller breaks up the earth really nicely, and then it like the things that get broken up rot, and then you grow great plants your first year, but you have also destroyed some of the organisms that are in your soil, and they have to recover from that. So there's a lot of debate about till versus not tilling, and I will say that I till sometimes, and when I till, I usually go shallow till and not deep till anymore. Because I've learned over my life too. And that can really help you get the soil to a consistency you want. I'm working with clay though. And so what till is good at is you usually get fairly decent production your first year. And if you need to mix in a bunch of things to make it um, like a better soil consistency, that can be a great way to do it. If you want to be gentler on your soil, you can go with a no-till or low-till method. You can use a garden fork and turn the soil, and that sort of keeps those connections in place a little bit better. Or if you still have time, Northerners, you can do the lasagna mulch method where you put down layers. Look up lasagna mulch, but you basically go a layer of poop, a layer of mulch, a layer of leaf litter from the forest, a layer of wood chips. You might put cardboard under all of that, and the earthworms come up and they basically till it for you. It's magic when that happens well. I've done the lasagna method the official way, and I may have missed a layer or done it in the wrong order, guys. Oh, yes. Sometimes they put molasses down to attract the worms, and it works great. I've also done the lasagna method with what I had and didn't do all the layers, and it worked great. The key is to get wherever you're doing the lasagna method, like make it so whatever's growing there can't grow. And cardboard for me has been the best way to do that. So um, just if you're going to go that route, go that route. But another thing you can do is sod removal. And that's basically scraping if you have grass or if you have a field, cut it really low. And you have grass, You scrape the top layer of grass off so that it's bare dirt. And you can do this with a sod cutting tool. You can just do it with a shovel. You can rent a sod cutter, I hear. I've never used one. It's some back-breaking work to do by hand. And a sharp shovel really helps you. And you're in essence cutting the roots off, and then you have bare ground. And then you can put amendments on it and deep mulch, and that'll really help, or even turn it. I prefer to do that and turn the ground if I'm going to turn the ground versus leaving the grass on there. Tactical is in my house, and he's totally going to bring me a glass of water if he hears me right now, because apparently I'm choking. I need a glass of water really badly. So he saw me. He's like, I heard my name. So those are all ways to get started. To me, you choose the way that you want to do and that works best for you, and go for it. At this time of year, if you decide to just start your garden later, you can solarize or smother as well. So you can take the sod off and get some clear plastic and dig a trench around it and stretch it really tight so that it's like gonna concentrate the sun on it, and then like solarize the crap out of it, and that'll cook any seeds that are in the soil. And that really can help you set a foundation for not having as many weeds. Or you can smother it, which is basically that same concept, only black plastic. And if you are going to do either of these two methods, thank you, look up how to do that. John Moody wrote a book called Winning the War on Weeds, and he has like a whole chapter about it. And he explains in excruciating detail how to do it. And it is worth reading that chapter in excruciating detail to set yourself up for success, because the things that people usually do wrong when they solarize is they don't prep the ground right so it's not flat. And so they get air pockets in there, and they turn it into a greenhouse and grow plants instead of actually killing the seeds, getting the temperature up enough to kill the seeds. Smothering, on the other hand, is basically you take something dark and do the same thing. And it's a little more forgiving if you have little air pockets, and it will just kill things because they don't have access to light. So what we do most here, I know you're gonna be shocked to hear it, is we'll smother it. We've had a whole section of the garden under billboard tarps for a year now. And we're pulling those back this year, and we're going to look at what we want to do with that ground. I'm not pulling them back for another few months, actually. But that's how we expand the garden, is we'll just throw the tarps down and walk away for the season and have them weighted down with rocks. That's my method. That's how I don't till. Then if you do that and you have bare ground, be prepared to use mulch. And the reason you want to do that is that things will grow in the bare soil. And you can add amendments, like rabbit poop at this time of year is a great thing to add because you don't have to compost it first. That is better than buying compost from the store. If you have to buy compost from the store, do that. But try to source something locally. If you get horse poop or cow poop, you may have things growing in your garden that was in the poop. Just be ready for that. But you want to get that in there. And rabbit and goat and sheep poop is my first choices. And then if I have to use something else, I use that. And back to the solarizing. The reason you dig a trench around the area you're solarizing is to bury the plastic and pull it tight and get those edges all buried so the wind doesn't blow it off. Anyway, so mulch is something like wood chips or whatever. Leaf mulch is great, but wood chips later will help keep the soil temperature more stable. So fewer hots and colds. It'll help keep water soaked into your ground, and it will help your plants long term. But if you're going to be seeding, direct seeding, like radishes can go out right now in Tennessee, that needs to be on the soil and kept wet by watering it or by the rain watering it until it germinates and gets up there. And then once it's a plant, you can mulch around it. So what I do is, well, I'll talk about what I do later, but well, I'll just say it now because I started saying it. What I do is I I mulch my beds at this time of year. And then if I need to seed, I pull it aside and seed where I'm going to direct seed versus transplant. So that's what you do if you've never had a garden before. Decide if you're going to till or not. Decide if you're doing raised beds versus ground. Definitely remove the sod before doing any of that if you can. And then if you can solarize or smother, if you still have time, go for it. Here in Tennessee, you don't, unless you're going to do a later planting like in June. And then be ready to mulch it and add nutrient to it. I prefer organic matter over mined minerals, but I would add those if I had to, right? And then if I was facing this right now in the north, I would be going for the lasagna bed method right now. Here in the south, I would be taking the top layer off of sod. I would be putting down some things like leaf mulch and poop and molasses and cardboard, and I'd walk away until May. And then I'd start in May. And if I was more like urgent than that because I was freaking out, uh, I would then probably hand to fork it. I would probably put the bed down and wait 2 to 4 weeks and then fork it. What you miss when you don't have something to plant into in the early spring in Tennessee are lettuces, radishes, peas, potatoes, brassica family, which is like the broccoli, the cabbage, all of that. And to me, it's better to trade that off for less work than to try to force those things because those things also tend to like a lot of nutrient. And so if to the extent that you're just opening the ground for the first time and you don't have poop in there, your ground's probably not as fertile as you need it to be. So, your first year is usually not the best year anyway, unless you were on it in the fall. Okay, so here's what you do if you have an existing garden, like I do. One, last fall when I realized that I was not going to get my poop in a group, I threw a cover crop out there. So if like me, you were on it enough to do that, at least you have something growing that's easy to pull back. Okay? I didn't do that for all my beds though, so I got the cover crop that nature gave me too. And in my place, that is chickweed and dead nettle. And that's okay too. And I have some wild violet up there and some clover. All of those are fine. And all of those kind of happened because over the years they just happen because of where that soil is in its journey. So for me, that's good news. I can just peel that vegetation back, work it into the soil if I want to, or just chop and drop it. And that's what I did. Now, if what you got was Bermuda grass, then you have a different thing. You need to clear out your garden of the dead things that you left behind, which I also had to do. Squash vines, tomato vines, green bean vines, all that comes out and goes in your compost pile. And then you got to pull the weeds. And if you have Bermuda grass, you have to pull the weeds. And you're going to be dealing with that for years probably. And every time you see a little one come up, you deal with it. Then you'll have a blank slate and what I do is I put down rabbit poop or some other fertility. Before I had rabbits, I actually would go to a friend of mine who raised cattle. I guess it's cattle is the plural of cow. And he would give me scoops of cow poop that had been percolating over the winter for $15 a scoop. And that's what I would put down. Or I would take the litter from the chicken coop that we scooped out in the fall and that has been sitting all winter. I would put that out. So I've always had lots of options for fertility because we have livestock here. So if you don't have that, then put the word out in the homesteader network, like who has piles of poop that I can hit, right? And then, of course, worst case scenario, you can buy it, but it's just so much better if you get good things. And then you want to put down any seeds right now that you're ready to put down. So I might put on top of the poop some soil. I might put leaf mulch and then seed in that. But what I'm not going to do where I want direct seeds is put wood mulch down. And then anywhere else you're not ready to plant yet that you're like planning to transplant your tomatoes and your brassicas and your Swiss chard and any of that, you want to put if you can get leaf mulch or leaf litter from the forest, you want to put like an inch of that. I'm lucky enough that my neighbor raked leaves and put them through a leaf mulcher and gave me bags of them. So I like used all of his leaves on my garden. And then you'll put a few inches of wood chips. The best wood chips to use for this are ones that have been rotting for a while. If you can't get wood chips, you can mulch with other things. I have mulched with burlap bags on top of that. Like, the goal of this is to keep things moist under there and to help with the, like, temperature regulation. So the leaf mulch, if you have it, is gonna help you a lot, and then on top of that, you're just trying to keep the moisture in, and burlap does a great job of that, and it keeps weeds from, like, popping up because they hit the burlap and they're like, "Never mind." Which is exactly what your lettuce seeds will do if you put that over your lettuce seeds, which is why you wanna have the soil there, okay? Um, uh, Shredded paper works, newspaper works, feed bags work, cardboard works. I don't like to use the cardboard that's glossy. I just use the stuff like an Amazon box, I'll use that. I take the tape off usually, and any of that can work for mulching. I had a mulch problem last year. Like, we didn't have mulch, and I've actually used, like, the actual pine chips from Tractor Supply. That doesn't work great, by the way. They work, but they keep the weeds down, but they also did like, that's the only time I've ever had, like, something sapped nutrient out of the soil, apparently. Like, people tell you don't use fresh wood chips because 'cause they'll take the nitrogen out of the soil, and they do a little bit, I guess, but I've never had problems with, like, the ones you get from the arborist. You can buy bark dust. If you buy bark dust, you wanna make sure it's not treated with Roundup. You don't want it treated with a weed retardant. So, I would test it before using it. We get cedar chips here. Those are okay in the garden, but not great because they actually, um, they keep weeds down really well, which means they're keeping weeds down in your garden. So I put those in the pathways between my beds, and then I get wood chips from the local arborist. And I'm lucky that nearby the arborist lets us come scoop wood chips out. But if you see people trimming trees in your area, you can be like, "Hey, dump your wood chips here." It works really great. So that's what I do to get the beds ready. And then anytime I want to plant something direct seed, I pull that layer to the bare soil. I put the seeds in the soil. I water it at least once a day, twice a day if it's a hotter time of year. When I get ready to put my squash in, I make a little cup. Like, I take the mulch aside and I make a little cup for the water to flow down into. And then once the plant is tall enough, I bring the mulch back. And some plants prefer mulch touching it, and others you still want to leave a little ring around it. So just get to know that too. So I think at that point, you can go back and plan what you're going to plant. Make sure you have the seeds you need. We have seed exchanges start. Like, I have a seed exchange here in like 2 weeks that where people can just trade seeds or get seeds or whatever. Like, I have too many seeds because uh, Matt, like the electrician Matt's wife, Ashley gets her hands on all of the toss out seeds from the store. Like, instead of throwing them in the garbage, they give them to her, and she gives like big packets of them to all sorts of people. I'm one of those people, and then I try to give them away too because our idea is why let this resource go to waste? We're all on this adventure towards growing our own food, so we should share the seeds, right? So basically, what I've done in my garden is I've cleared everything out. I've put rabbit poop down. I put leaf litter down. I put wood chips down, except for in the place where the peas are. And I am prepared now when I go do the radishes to just spread it apart anywhere I put a radish. It's a little bit more work, but I'm not growing like large scale. If it was large scale, you'd probably go more rows and you'd use a hoe and make a little separation and do it that way. But I'll end up doing it by hand because I'm going to grow like 45 radishes and that'll be that. And I'm going to do the same thing with the beets, like pull it aside and I'll direct sow the beets. Maybe I should try transplanting those this year. Nah. Anyway, but the cool thing about having that is the mulch is right there. And then when it's time to mulch around the plant, you can just kind of push it. And that works great. And for me, if I like last year, I waited to get the mulch and then I had to go scoop mulch in, the extreme heat. So that's what I would do now in Tennessee to get ready for spring planting. If I had this same scenario and I was further north, I would just prepare my beds like I usually do. Like I'd go, okay, I'm just going to do my lasagna layers and go for it because I'm still not planting in the north for a while yet. And a lot of stuff can change. Now, if you really want to give your garden a kick, and this is for any scenario that we've talked about, consider integrating biochar into your garden. Right? So I was all set to buy a biochar kiln that's automated that can do wood pellets. And then Margot sent me a video, Margot with an O sent me a video of like how to crimp 1 gallon can into another one and make this tube for cooking biochar. Put your material in there and throw it in the campfire and it's all contained. And so I might try that out rather than spend the money on something that's more automated because I want to add biochar to my soil. So that's something you can do to make your soil better in a lot of ways. It gives habitat for the bacteria, the beneficial bacteria in your soil to live in. So that's and it helps retain moisture in your soil, which when it's really hot in the summer, you're going to end up wanting that. I also highly recommend that you listen to the survival podcast episode on natural farming that had Steven Reisner in it, where he talks about collecting IMF, which basically you make rice not quite all the way, and you go put it in a basket in the woods, and you collect the beneficial fungi in the woods, and you bring that back, and then you make a diluted spray with some of it, and there's a way to stabilize it so you can use it for a long time. And that helps wake up your soil in a good way. Now, it seemed like a lot of work to me when I first heard about this. And then I listened to Steven Reisner explain how to do it. And I realized that it's kind of like we talk about 15-minute homestead projects. Like I spent less than 45 seconds once a day for 5 days making sprouts. IMO. Sorry, I said IMF. Thank you, Angie. So IMO is like you're gonna, I think I was thinking F for fungus. So you make the rice and that'll take you 5 minutes. And then you put it out there and that'll take you 5 minutes, depending on where you put it. And this time of year, he recommends putting it in a basket, by which I think he means like a not plastic basket. And he's like, you can get them at the Dollar Tree. You know what? This time of year, you can get baskets anywhere because it's Easter season. And then you leave it there for a while, right? And then you have to process it. And so it does take time, but it takes time in 15-minute increments. And, on this topic, Angie says in the comments, collecting IMOs isn't hard. It just takes a bit of time. Yeah. So you're not going to have it tomorrow, but integrating those beneficial bacteria into your garden helps make nutrients more accessible to your plants from day one. And that gives you stronger plants, which gives you a better success rate. He also talks about using the lactobacillus bacteria, which is really interesting to me as a cheesemaker because I have a lot of that around. Or you can just get leaf litter from the woods. Like you can go to the woods and like scrape back the leaves and get a little bit of the soil and sprinkle that in your garden. In your same thing, you're bringing fungi in, you're bringing beneficial bacteria into your soil to help make your garden stronger. And this can help keep you from needing to use synthetic fertilizers. Like we've always said, okay, go ahead and use Miracle Grow if you got to use it, if that's the only way to keep your plants alive. But you're basically training your plants to be dependent on a chemical input rather than connecting them with the biology that's already there. So I put the link to that podcast episode in the show notes at the Survival Podcast. And he's going to be talking about an AI tool that allows you to tailor what you do to your soil. But he actually talks about how to do it in there as well and shares his recipe for it. He has a second interview with Spirko in February of this year where he talks about aquaponics. But definitely, like, that is, if you need something to listen to while you're getting your garden ready this weekend, listen to that because you'll be like, man, I'm going to go to the Dollar Tree and get me a basket and I'm going to make IMO. That's what you're going to do. And if you aren't, you might put out there, hey, has anybody made some and can I have some? Because when you make one batch, it's not like it only works for, a week. Like you can use it, you can spread it around. So anyway, all in all, it's not too late to get your garden beds ready, but you may not do as well as you would if you would have been true to your intention in the fall and started with your gardens then. However, you can make a huge difference this year just by making some IMO and by getting going this weekend, where I think it's even going to be nice in many places to at least get the foundation set for your garden. You still got time to do it. And if you do a little bit each weekend between now and planting, you should be in good shape anyway. So don't lose heart. Like get out there, decide where your garden's going to go, decide what's going to go in it, and just do a little bit every day that you can. And you'll be surprised what you can get done. So go out there and grow some food, guys. With that, if you like the show and want to support the work I'm doing here, you can do it in two ways. One, get your coffee at hollowroast.com. Two, consider becoming a member. Head over to livingfreeintennessee.com to find out more. With that, guys, go out. Don't forget to get yourself Reliance Festival tickets before prices go up too. Anyway, go out, make it a great week.